The Waste Management Phoenix Open isn't going to be quite what it usually is. There are going to be fewer fans, not going to be quite as rowdy, quite as raucous, but there should still be some elite golf based on who's in this field at the top. I mean, we have Jon Rahm, we have Justin Thomas, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, last year's winner, Webb Simpson. Feels like he's getting overlooked already, as usual, which is the case for Webb. And you can probably throw Daniel Berger into that tier if you want as well. I probably would. I think Daniel Berger very much a part of that top six this week. But, that said, yeah, we're not going to have the fans. It's going to be a little bit of a different environment, but it should be a really, really good fields. This one usually comes down to the wire anyway. I see no different. I see no reason to think it'll be different. So, I mean, how can you bet the top of the card this week when you're staring at these names, at these numbers? How should the presence of all these studs really affect your daily fantasy strategy on FanDuel? We'll dig into all that. We'll dig into the field, the course, my win simulations, anything else you'd like to cover. Just hit up the comments section on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, Twitch if you have any questions for this week's event. But welcome on in to the FanDuel PGA Q&A for this week's PGA Tour event, the Waste Management Phoenix Open. I'm your host, Brandon Gdula, the managing editor over at numberFire.com. Let's dive in. This is not quite a full field. The field right now is about 135 golfers, give or take. We're going to have a cut, though, but that does mean the top 65 plus ties. It gets a little easier percentage-wise as opposed to 156 golfers. So it'll be ever so slightly just easier to get a 6-for-6 lineup through to the weekend on FanDuel. That's really the key each and every week. It's not as easy as you might think, but this week, just statistically, with the cut being what it is, with the field being what it is, it's going to be a little bit easier than it has been in recent weeks. But, I mean, just take a look at this field at the top. We have Jon Rahm at 6.5 to 1, Justin Thomas 9 to 1, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele 11 to 1 each. Last year's winner, Webb Simpson, is 17 to 1, Daniel Berger 20 to 1, Hideki Matsuyama, two-time winner out in Phoenix, 25 to 1. It just kind of goes on and on. Harris English is in a pretty, he's in good form. He's flushing it, which is the reports. But 28 to 1, my win simulations always tend to like Harris English just because of his statistical fit. Sungjae Im, Will Zalatoris, Bubba Watson. Didn't get it done last week by any means, but I like Bubba again this week. I already bet Bubba once more this week. So I'm pretty intrigued in a bounce back from Bubba in much better weather. So far, though, it's pretty tight. Not a whole lot jumps out to me. My only other bets so far for the week are top 10s on Corey Connors, Russell Henley, Taylor Gooch, Ryan Moore. I'm really trying to study the top of this field. It's so hard to decipher between Rahm, JT, Rory, Xander, if you want to even get action on that top four. It's just that good of a field. But again, if you have any questions about this week's field, hit up the YouTube chat, Facebook, Periscope, Twitch. I'll do my best to answer those questions. So for now, let's look at the course, TPC Scottsdale. I'm going to jump over to Data Golf as usual. This is where I always start my process, specifically with this little window here. It shows what drives dispersion in scoring, which of the 4 strokes gain stats drive the dispersion in scoring at a particular course. It's usually always tee to green, strokes gain approach leading. It leads here. It's 29.4%. That's down from the tour average of 34.7%. It's still about as important as off the tee and around the green combined. That's about 33.5%, give or take. But strokes gain off the tee jumps up to 18.9%, up from about 15% on the tour average. So driving the ball matters a lot this week. Is it more distance? Is it more accuracy? We'll get into that in just a second. But distance, accuracy, either way, you got to drive the ball well, gain strokes off the tee. You need to gain strokes with the approach, and then you need to putt well. Pretty simple. Ball striking and putting kind of separates the best from the best, and that's what we have this week. But you're probably going to need that because if you look at recent winners, we have Webb Simpson last year. We have Ricky Fowler the year before. Gary Woodland. Then Hideki went back-to-back here. 17 under, 14 under for him. Brooks Koepka the year before. Kevin Stadler. was before that, but that field was a little bit lighter in terms of the strength of field from the OWGR, the official World Golf Rankings. Phil Mickelson won in 2013 at 28 under, and then Kyle Stanley the year prior. But the field gets a lot stronger as you go throughout the years. Pretty much from Brooks in 2015, it got a lot better. And since then, again, Brooks Koepka, Hideki twice, Gary Woodland, Ricky Fowler, Webb Simpson. So, long shots can still win. They can always win, but you're going to have to defeat, Rahm, JT, Rory, Xander, Daniel Berger, Webb. Like all these guys, you're going to have to fend off. And even if two of them, say, struggle, miss the cut, you still have a lot left to go. So that's going to sort of drive things this week. It's just a really good field at the top. Of note, though, the average winning score of the past 10 years at this course, 17.5 under par. Only one of the past 10 winners, though, was better than 18 under. That was Phil back in 2012 at 28 under. Removing that from the data, the past 9 winners then, excluding Phil, the average winning score is about 16.3 under par. So not the most scoreable, not necessarily a complete birdie fest. It's ranked. This course is ranked about 20th, give or take, in average FanDuel points the past 3 years relative to all the courses played in that year. So it's going to be a little bit less about birdies and a little bit more about finishing well. That's what we saw last week. Finishing position drove a lot of the scoring rather than birdies. So that's something that's in play yet again this week. Which stats matter the most? Well, I mentioned driving. I want to look at this course fit tool over on Data Golf and look and see driving distance matters more here than your average course, but so does driving accuracy. So what does that mean? To me, where I'm settling is preferring distance over accuracy for one simple reason. You can't fake distance. You can club down and hit fairways. But what this really shows is that one way or the other, you have to gain strokes off the tee. So gaining strokes off the tee, just strokes gained off the tee, is a key stat for this week, in addition to strokes gained approach. Around the green play does not matter nearly as much here. It's usually the least important of the four. Almost always the least important of the 4 strokes gained stats. We see a little bit of a de-emphasis on strokes gained around the green this week, and putting is about the same as your usual PGA Tour stop. So kind of we can keep it simple this week, and that's always fun. Strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach, that makes up ball striking, and then strokes gained putting. Yeah, that's also, about 85% of playing golf well. If you look at the scoring dispersion, around the greens around 15%. So I just like to keep it simple there. But going back to who's won here, it's the best golfers. It's a tough field. You're going to have to succeed at just about everything. So we need our golfers to sort of do everything well. Just of note, if you are curious about this stuff, one of the most similar courses that's relevant to Scottsdale is Bay Hill, so the Arnold Palmer, and also here Kiowa, which is just relevant because that's where the PGA Championship is going to be this year. So if you want to play things this way, maybe keep an eye out for who does well at Phoenix. Maybe that will sort of overlap a little bit with the PGA Championship leaderboard. Just something to think about. So I actually got a question a few weeks ago too, multiple questions about course history and whether I factor that in and how. I don't usually factor it in that much, but again, sticking with Data Golf, they have a lot of great tools. We can see here that at Scottsdale, TPC Scottsdale, course history is more predictive here than most places. Really across the board, not a lot of courses really compare to TPC Scottsdale. Pebble Beach does, Muirfield does, and then this one's Augusta. This is a big one. But certain courses don't really show us who does well, year to year over a larger sample. But at TPC Scottsdale, we have seen trends that let us buy in to course history a little more than we would at other courses. So you can also check out and see who's done well at this course in the past. We know Hideki, 2-time winner, Jon Rahm, the betting favorite, great history at TPC Scottsdale. Xander, runner-up last week. I liked him as a bet. I kind of like him again among the guys at the top at the number of 11-1. it's hard. It's just hard for me to quit Xander because he's so good overall. Max Homa, Byung Hun An, lots of good names here, and Bubba Watson. Again, I have a hard time quitting Bubba, but it's a good fit for him, and he's succeeded here, so that does matter. And as we see here, course history matters more at TPC Scottsdale than it does typically. So, if you're looking for, this my stats list for this week is going to be strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach, driving distance, putting, and if you want, look back and see who's done well at TPC Scottsdale in the past. But, with that out of the way, let's look into the field. Let's look at some stats now. Let's look at the top 5 in the field. I cut off Daniel Berger here for this just because I could probably throw him in if I wanted, but let's do it this way just because I do kind of consider Berger in that tier with these guys. These are the 6 top golfers in terms of FanDuel salary. I think it's very justified. If you look on my betting, according to my betting model, Jon Rahm is the favorite, same as we see in the betting odds at 9.9%. That doesn't mean he's a great value at 6.5 to 1. I'll talk more about that in just a bit, but these are the favorites to win. They make up about 41.5% of the wins in my simulations. That's about 20,000 total simulations. These guys, these 6 account for the wins. If you throw in Harris English, it's about 44%. So, yeah, still more likely that the field wins than these top 6 or 7, but a lot of the win equity comes from these names, and that's important. But what you will see is no red flags across the board. For me, a red flag is if you're in the 25th percentile or below relative to the field in any of these key stats. If you look at the adjusted strokes gained data, which comes from Fantasy National, but then I do my own adjustments. I used to use Data Golf, but this is just easier for me to wrangle, and I can manipulate it a little bit more, and adjust for how long it's been since you played a particular round. No red flags here. Very little black dots, which is below 50th percentile. So pretty much everywhere we see. So you're just kind of nitpicking, honestly, among the top. And that's what it comes down to. For me, the best process play is Jon Rahm at the top, even at that $12,000 salary on FanDuel. But I wouldn't talk anyone out of any of these golfers if you have a strong lean. Webb Simpson's probably going to go a bit overlooked as usual. Whenever he's in tougher fields, it kind of feels like that can happen. But I mean, he was last year's winner, so I'm having a hard time figuring that out. But from a process standpoint, they all make sense. They all do everything you need. The iron play is all great from all of them. The short game is actually pretty good for all of them as well. So pretty fascinating this week at the top. Process-wise for me on FanDuel, I'm going to rank them Jon Rahm, Justin Thomas, Xander, Daniel Berger, Webb Simpson, Rory, once you factor in the stats, the process, and the salary. But again, I'm not going to talk anybody out of Rory. I think he's in a really good spot. I think he's trending up, and really his form, whenever people were out on Rory, it wasn't as bad as it might have, most people may have made it seem. So again, you can't really go wrong at the top for this week. But again, Jon Rahm is my favorite play on FanDuel from a process standpoint. And the second tier, I should say, not the mid-range, is also, it's pretty intriguing. We got some big names here, lots of good data across the board. And we see that Daniel Berger, I'm going to try to lop him off in this conversation, but Hideki, 2-time winner, does everything but putt. And if you go back through his log, you kind of have to win on the PGA Tour. The average PGA Tour winner since the start of 2020 gains about 5-ish strokes putting. He doesn't really do that ever. That's what's held him back. When he has won here, he didn't really gain. He was around 1.5 in both of them, if I recall correctly. Definitely wasn't an outlier performance putting. So he has to have an outlier performance tee to green and not putt terribly in order to win. So I've been out on Hideki for quite some time just because the putting is not that great overall. Ryan Palmer is someone at the bottom of this tier who's in really good form. His stats are trending up. He's been putting really, really well. So I'm kind of a little bit hesitant to get, too heavy on Ryan Palmer just because he's performing at the high end. So I have him highlighted. I think he's a good floor play. But if I'm rostering one golfer in this tier, it's going to be Bubba Watson. I've been talking about him for a few weeks now, but if you look at him, just great tee to green numbers. The short game's not quite there, but the chipping, the around the green play, we don't quite need so much this week. The putting isn't great, but we have seen him do quite well in Phoenix in the past. So I like Bubba this week as an outright, and I like him on FanDuel as well. If we jump down more and look at the 9,000 range, it's okay. I have some names highlighted here, specifically Russell Henley, Sam Burns. My model loves Russell Henley just because the long-term iron play is really, really good. It rates out so well relative to the field. He's the best iron player in the field once adjusted for the field strength. I should say probably even when adjusted for field strength. That's how good he's been in good spots. So Russell Henley, one of the plays I like the most at 97, but I also like Sam Burns as well. 97, same salary here, but Sam Burns really long off the tee, 98th percentile in driving distance. The putting is pretty solid. We prefer him on Bermuda. That's what we get this week, but it is overseeded a lot, so I don't really consider it straight Bermuda this week, but it is what it is. And again, if you guys have any questions about this fields, betting, FanDuel, head-to-heads, anything like that, just hit up the YouTube chat, Facebook, Periscope, Twitch, and I will answer things. But I'm about to get into my betting model after I hit on the value range, which, spoilers, not that appealing this week to me. So I'm trying to keep things a little bit more balanced this week because I want the most chances to hit the winner, which sounds obvious, but the most chances to hit the winner at a in a field this tough at this course, what we've seen is big names. So that leads me to more of a balanced build, probably one of those studs. And so I am going to be in this 9,000 range, thinking of if I lock in Xander, for example, or John Rahm, probably try to get to Bubba or someone else in that range, maybe Ryan Palmer, maybe Sungjae Im, but then jump down and live in this range rather than the 8,000 and below because it is a little spotty there. From a process standpoint, but there are some good names here. Corey Connors too stands out very, very specifically. His odds have jumped up in the betting markets, but you see 95th percentile adjusted strokes gained off the tee, 94th in approach. The short game though is not quite great, so kind of a similar mold to Bubba, just not nearly as long off the tee. But he can gain strokes off the tee because he hits fairways as well. So Corey Connors, someone I've been keeping my eye on, and he's been putting a lot better. Basically not putting himself out of tournaments, which is all you can ask for someone who is so good tee to green. So Corey Connors is a top 10. I already bet him, but he's probably a mainstay for my FanDuel lineups, or at least my main sort of cash game lineup at that salary. I think that's a really good number for him. Brendan Steele has good form at this course. Good long-term iron player, 95th percentile. Long off the tee as well. Not the best putter, but also not terrible. So he's someone I'm keeping my eye on. And then as always, Taylor Gooch at 9,100. Taylor Gooch is someone I like to play a lot because you can see, despite the salary, no red flags. Same for Sebastian Munoz. Some of the more balanced value golfers that we ever get access to. But, there's nothing here to take me off of Taylor Gooch. 50th percentile or better in distance and fairways gained. Good putter. Solid enough iron player, but Munoz and Gooch both do enough for me. So we do have plenty of options in that 9,000 range to help us balance things out. And then if you go down below that, it just gets kind of ugly pretty quickly for me. And I don't really like to build around value golfers. I feel guilty sometimes by not thinking about more value plays, more, quote unquote punt plays, but the win equity is very low for a lot of these guys, just understandably, whether you do that from a simulation standpoint or just a betting odds standpoint. Not a whole lot of golfers better than 100-1. Actually, just one, Chris Kirk. I think Chris Kirk's going to be a pretty popular pick this week. I don't mind Chris Kirk. Again, not a whole lot to worry about in his profile. No red. Oh, the only red flag is distance, which again is a key stat for me. But if you can hit fairways and gain strokes off the tee, which he has shown the ability to do, 58th percentile off the tee, 68th percentile in fairways gained. I'm fine with it. So Chris Kirk, someone I would consider, but in that upper 8,000 range, I prefer Henrik Norlander and Ryan Moore. Norlander, great showing last week, was in the mix, runner up. Great iron player, 82nd percentile adjusted strokes gained approach since the start of 2020. Not long, but does hit fairways, so he can gain strokes off the tee. Ryan Moore, pretty similar story. Doesn't gain distance, but hits fairways. Not good around the green. So if you take those, if you take around the green out of things, Ryan Moore should benefit from that. So Ryan Moore, one of my favorite value plays as well. And then like things just drop off so much. You can't really find golfers down here who sort of do everything well. I'm gonna try to do this on the fly. I don't know how it's gonna work, but if we just kind of filter golfers greater than, let's say, the 50th percentile off the tee and approach, it gets pretty thin. And then if you want to do that as well for putting, it's a pretty small list. We get Sepp Straka, who I'd be fine with this week. I think he's sort of a good low-end play. Joel Damon, a bit of a home game for him, I think. I think he's from the area. I think he does well at this course, but a good fit because he's good tee to green. The putting's really come up. But Charlie Hoffman, just keep an eye out for his health. But it drops off a lot. So value plays, long shots to bet, not really the best week for that. Speaking of long shots and bets, I'm gonna jump over to my win simulation model and just look and see what stands out here. These are sorted by the most likely winners according to my simulations. The way that I simulate stuff out is I take long-term adjusted form from the PGA Tour, the Korn Ferry Tour, the European Tour, and I take your round by round scoring, adjust that for the field you're in, simulate stuff out from there. But I also do it a different way where I take your long-term adjusted off the tee approach around the green and putting and simulate it out that way as well. And then I combine I average those two out. That way I can kind of get, a feel for who's a really good golfer long-term, just overall. And that also can include the European Tour and the Korn Ferry Tour, but then also who's doing it from iron play, off the tee play. And then whenever off the tee play is more important, I can bump that up in the model. So that's what drives this. Again, if you have any questions, hit up the YouTube chat, Facebook, Periscope, Twitch as well. But it's kind of tight at the top. Like I said, this week, the top 7 combined for 45.3% of the wins in my simulations. So yeah, again, the field is still more likely to win than those top 7, but those are the guys. It's going to be hard to beat them because just think for a Sam Burns to come out and win this, he's going to have to beat John Rahm, Justin Thomas, Xander, Rory, Daniel Berger, Webb Simpson. You can throw Harris English in there. It's going to be really tough, and we just have seen for years now that this event is won by some of the best golfers in the world. So that is very, very important to keep in mind. At the top, there's not a ton of betting value. For me, I'm probably going to go back to Xander if I am in on one of the favorites. He's really, really good long-term, hasn't been getting the wins. I don't think that's his fault. I think it's probably mostly variance. We have seen him lead the PGA champion or the Tour Championship rather in 72-hole scoring this past year. He can do it, but yeah, maybe as much as I love Xander, maybe 11-1 is a little too short. I'm much more likely to start my card off with Daniel Berger this week at 20-1. Just one of the best players in the world. Isn't quite priced as such. He's not in that same tier from a FanDuel Sportsbook odds perspective, is kind of in that tier on FanDuel. So I like Daniel Berger. No issues starting my card there. Webb Simpson, I mean, I barely talked about Webb this week at all, but it's just because we haven't seen a ton of him. But when he does play, he's great because he's Webb Simpson. So I'm probably looking mostly at Daniel Berger at the top. I've already bet Bubba Watson. My model shows a little bit of slight negative value on him, but I don't always just do what the model says. I try to make sure that I do look at the outliers like a Russell Henley. But again, even with Russell Henley rating out really well, I personally have a hard time viewing Henley as closing the door on all these guys. So I bet him as a top 10 I'll just sort of play that one by ear. But Harris English, if he hadn't won recently, I would definitely just go back to him. I don't like to bet guys who just won. Wins don't really accumulate that way. They don't sequence that way very often. It's just kind of variance, and he needed the variance to get that win anyway. So it doesn't really matter for this week. But I have a hard time with English. But again, Berger, Xander, English, Henley, Scotty Scheffler. The long-term form is better than the recent form. Ryan Palmer, someone I talked about. He's performing at the high end, so that is factored in here. Maybe it regresses, maybe the putter cools off, but Ryan Palmer fits the course. I would not be surprised if he is in the top 5. So I'm trying to keep perspective here, not get out over my skis with any of these bets. Chasing long shots, trying to keep it a little more, keep myself a little more honest this week. Moving down, I can just sort this by expected value. It's going to be Henley, Harris English, Joel Damon. I would bet Joel Damon top 20. Not going to bet him to win. Not very likely to get it done, all things considered. Sam Burns, Brendan Todd, Harold Varner, probably not. So again, it's a really tight week. I think it's fascinating from a daily fantasy standpoint with all the studs, but from a betting standpoint, I'm probably going to try to keep it pretty tight overall. Maybe take a long look at Xander, take a long look at Webb Simpson, long look at Daniel Berger. But Bubba is someone I'm in on. Russell Henley, again, sort of at that top 10 vibe. But I think that you could just pick your favorite stud and bet him. I think that's not the worst angle. And then focus a lot on matchups, top 10s, top 20s. That's the way I would play it. Just probably not a week to bet John Rahm and Justin Thomas. Try to find some more value there. But this should be a great field, great event, even without the typical Phoenix atmosphere, the environment, stepping up to that par 3. But look, we got Rahm, we got JT, Rory, Xander, Berger, Webb. It's going to come down to a great Sunday. So I think we're set for a great event, great FanDuel lineup, or great FanDuel lineup construction week. If you want to think about fading the studs, building all around that mid-range, right around 10,000, I think that's viable. But I'm probably landing with the one stud this week, and then balancing things out a little bit from there, living in that 9,000 range. I would say keep an eye on the updated betting once things get started, and see who's falling behind, because we can see some of these guys climb up the leaderboard. So I feel really confident with this week being good. I feel a little less confident about it from a picks perspective, but all told, we're going to get some great golf come Sunday. That's all I have for today. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Gdula13, or check out my DFS content on numberFire.com. Best of luck this week, and let's hit a winner.